the problem is it's a Russian roulette. The more you inject, the more chance you have of having an injection that's going to be close, right? I consider that about one time out of 20, you get close. You get something close enough that you're harming people, okay? And you're not going to be able to repair. Now, that's I don't know if it's ever acceptable, but if you get one or two shots or maybe 6 shots like we were having when we were kids, it's not going to be visible. I mean, it's dangerous, but you wouldn't, and that's why you didn't have autism, when we were kids, well, that's why you didn't have obesity when we were kids either. Um, what you're seeing is as you're multiplying and generalizing these vaccines, and you have kids that have 50 shots, 80 shots. I think I had done a calculation, 80 shots by 18 years old, something like that.
Mm.
Well, if you have 5% chance of harming people, the chance of not being harmed is going to be 95% at the power of 80. I suggest everybody does the calculation, but 95% to the power of 80 is zero.
Well, let's use something that everybody can understand. You get two pair of dice, you roll them once, okay, something's going to come up. But let's say you want double six, which is let's say that's the bad thing. Well, if you just keep rolling those dice over and over and over again, you're going to hit double six. So stop rolling the dice.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi, this is Ken McCarthy, author of What the Nurses Saw, and today we're interviewing Marc Girardot, author of a very important book called The Needle's Secret. And what I'm about to say is going to sound dramatic, but I literally believe it. If we are going to be viable as a species from a biological point of view, we better all understand what's in this book. Because there are some things going on in the way medicine is practiced that give every appearance of being an absolute catastrophe, not just on a personal level, but literally species-wide. So I know that's a big claim, but I've been around a long time, and I don't make claims like this lightly, but I cannot come to any other conclusion. So welcome, Marc.
Thank you for having me, Ken.
Well, I'm really glad to be talking about this book with you because it's a new book, by the way, The Needle's Secret. And let's understand your background for people that don't know you. It's a fascinating background, and in many ways, it makes you the perfect person to be doing this analysis.
Thank you. My background is I'm a generalist. I'm an MBA from one of the leading business schools in the world, in SEAD. I've worked in a variety of fields, industrial gases. I've been a consultant. I worked at Booz Allen and Hamilton a few years. And then after that, I worked for Cisco for 15 years, and I was the head of their automotive practice. I was advising CEOs and board members and executives in the automotive industry.
Gotcha. And people, if people think this through, it's complicated to build cars, and and there needs to be a lot of communication, and that communication needs to be on target. And let's get to the punchline on this particular part. There is no the tolerance for error in auto manufacturing is very, very small. Maybe you could give us an indication of what it is compared to medicine.
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand that, for example, when Mary Barra from GM was summoned to come to Senate a few years back, she was summoned for 13 ignition switches that supposedly caught fire, and over 10 years. So that's basically 100 million vehicles, each with about minimum 20,000 parts. So that's the degree of quality that's required from the automotive industry. 13 faults out of 20 trillion parts, something like that.
Okay. So this is your perspective on how the world should work. By the way, it's I think it's the perspective of many business people. I mean, we don't want to serve products that are inferior, so we take great care at quality control, and we seem to have it. The pharma and big medicine complex seem to have a very different attitude on quality control and preventing faults. So let's talk about why you there's many reasons, of course, and we're all interested in this COVID vaccination situation because so many people were coerced into getting involved in it. Some people were able to say no. Some people felt they couldn't. So there's obviously hundreds of millions, if not billions of people have had this on their mind, but you in particular have had this on your mind. Tell us when you got interested and some of the things that propelled you into going deep into the subject.
Well, there's a few things. I had worked in pharma and biotech, and
Oh,
notably I had worked for a competitor of BioNTech and Moderna right before COVID. So I knew a great deal about what these vaccines do and what they're supposed to trigger. And notably, one aspect of it was it's supposed to trigger your immune system to attack your the tumor cells.
tumor cells.
Yeah, of course. It's
So
it's
you
that's
were
the whole thing.
so you were working with a company that was working on vaccination against cancer,
Exactly.
and their theory is we're gonna educate the immune system to identify and go after tumor cells and eliminate them.
Exactly. So it means that, the whole narrative around antibodies is just part of the story. The other part of the story is you are injecting a huge number of nanoparticles. For Pfizer, it's about 10 billion. For Moderna, it's 20 billion, 40 billion.
Let's talk. I don't mean to interrupt you. Let's talk about this particular generation of so-called vaccines pre compared to others. But let's just define this topic of nanoparticle. I remember back in the 90s when the whole nano thing was slowly percolating, but now it's here. What is a nanoparticle and how does it end up in our vaccines and how could there be, how many did you say were in these vaccines?
Well, in Moderna, it's 40 billion.
So in one injection, there's literally 40 billion nanoparticles. This is new to injectables, right? This is not something that,
Yeah, actually, that's the part. That's one element of my theory that's very important. Is attenuated virus vaccines also do that. The fundamental of the problem is around the fact that you're inserting inside a cell um, something that's foreign, right? And either a message that's going to tell you the cell to produce an antigen or something that's not, and your immune system is going to recognize it, or you're just going to transport that foreign element. That's the way sometimes it's done. In both cases, it is toxic. It is cytotoxic. It kills the cell because your immune system is going to react and it's going to sell. So you need to realize that the potential in terms of destruction is 40 billion cells. And that scared me. That's one of the things that scared me very, very early on.
I'm sorry, could we, I just want to go back to something. So you said cytotoxic, so that means toxic to the cell.
Yes, it means it's
And
going to kill the cell.
so under the best of circumstances, by their very nature, these injectable things that they're calling vaccines are cytotoxic or cytotoxic or they have their nature is to kill cells. Now you mentioned 40 billion. How do they kill 40 billion cells?
Well, they don't.
Okay.
That's the thank God they don't. 40 billion cells is a ton of cells. They're the reason that the pharmaceuticals have put such a huge amount is that normally it's very ineffective. What is called transfection, the creation of the nanoparticles, you need to exert pressure or figure out ways to have them enter. Um, And so it's normally, and in most cases, so the people who are safe or not injured by the vaccines actually don't get that many. But there are cases, notably when it's injected inappropriately, where you get too much and you get concentrated harm.
Gotcha. And we have there's a general problem, but then there's a specific problem with the mRNA because they're using these nanoparticles. And you mentioned, again, tell us that number again, because it's so mind-boggling. How many nanoparticles per
10,
injection?
10 billion for Pfizer and 40 billion for Moderna.
And what is a nanoparticle exactly?
It's a sort of bowl of fat
A bowl
that
of what? Of spat?
fat, a lipid.
Oh, a
Lipid.
lipid, a bowl of fat.
Called-
So,
it's called a lipid nanoparticle. So it's basically little sticks of fat that rolled a bit like a cell actually, or a bit like a virus, and that when it penetrates or when it meets the wall of a cell, it's going to integrate into the cell. Once it's inside the cell, the load is unloaded, is delivered to the environment, and it starts hacking it. So it can hack it just like a virus, and that's what the mRNA does. Except in this case, it just creates the spike protein, which is just a part of the virus.
so
But
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
in any case, your immune system doesn't know the difference, right? So the immune system is just going to react to the fact that there's something foreign. It's like you have your home, somebody's broken into your home. You don't know what type of robber it is, if he's 6'5", or if he's small, if it's a woman, or what, you don't know what it is, but it's somebody who's an intruder, and you're going to call the police, and the police are going to take them out. It's exactly what's happening here. Now, what is super important is the reason why people in pharma and a lot of people are not concerned with these vaccines, is because our bodies have evolved to manage viruses and poison and toxins, and
Sure.
we're architected, we're designed by evolution in such a way as to to filter out, to mitigate all that harm that's coming from the outside. And that's the part that I discovered, the part of the Bolus theory, is the fact that when you inject intramuscularly in the muscle, normally the muscle is supposed to act a bit like a saline bag, right? And it's basically going to trickle the vaccine into your bloodstream progressively over days, over 2-3 days. And that's okay. Why it's okay? Because it's going to be a drop after a drop. It's going to be mixed into your bloodstream. And what the body does very well is disseminates. We need to have oxygen everywhere, and certainly not missing anywhere, especially in the brain, because you die very quickly. So our bodies are very reliable machines to distribute. And so they're going to distribute the vaccine everywhere. And it's a sort of divide and conquer strategy. The vaccine is going to harm one cell, but not all the cells around. So at a micro level, it's going to be able to handle it. Let me try an analogy. If you have a bomb that explodes, or or a fire, or somebody who's got a gas accident into a city like Paris right now, the city's not going to be destroyed. We'll call the firemen. They're going to come in. They're going to extinguish the fire, and somebody's going to come and repair the place. Okay, it's not a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal for the person. Okay, so for the person who lives in the apartment, maybe she's dead. That's the case for that cell. That cell is destroyed. It gets processed locally, and there's no big deal. The problem is, imagine you're in Dresden in the Second World War, and American planes are coming, and they're basically carpet bombing the area. When that occurs, well, everything gets destroyed. All the buildings are in fire, including the firemen. So there's no emergency services. Everything is destroyed. And that's what's that's when harm occurs. Harm occurs when locally there's so much damage concentrated that the functions of whatever has been damaged is disrupted, right? If it's your heart, you're dead. If it's your brain, you're dead. If it's your liver, you're gonna have, you're gonna have hepatitis. If
Gotcha.
it's that's exactly it's
So,
it's a,
so in the, so pardon me, in the ideal world then, and you talked about a saline you might have pronounced it differently, saline? Yes, a
yeah,
bag
yeah,
with basically salt water in it, which is if anybody's ever been to the hospital, they seem to always like to put that into you right away. And the concept there is a slow, steady drip. You don't take a fire hose and inject it into somebody, right? So
exactly.
the theory of these vaccines is that if they are distributed through our body's circulatory system in a drip method, the body can deal with the collateral damage, I guess we call it, that occurs as these toxic elements, because they are a toxin. You
Yeah,
certainly don't want a big dose of them straight to your heart. Um, but the body can deal with it if it's delivered in a drip method. And
yeah,
what is the vaccine trying to do? You mentioned that in the nanoparticles of an mRNA, it's a lipid, it's a fat. When it touches a cell, the cell goes, "Oh, I kind of recognize you. Come on in," and then it goes in. And mRNA, it gives instructions. Is that's what the theory is?
yeah. It gets read. It's an instruction. It's a recipe that's read, and it produces a protein.
And the protein is
That
the spike protein that everyone talks about.
Yeah, in that case, it's the spike protein, which is the bit that's sticking outside of the um, the viruses, the viron, um, and that is supposed to train your immune system to attack the cells that are contaminated to help you.
So
Um,
you're kind of teaching, the idea is the injection teaches the body to recognize these spike cells,
yes,
and then go after them.
yeah,
And it happens to do it by teaching it to make spike cells, right?
yes, that's the way this method is done. There's other ways it could have been done. There's actually Novavax is actually producing spike protein and presenting it to your immune system. That's another way. There's a variety of ways.
So there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat, but obviously it all has to start with an injection. Now, you mentioned this idea of intermuscular versus intravenous. Let's make sure everybody understands what we're talking about. So
Yeah.
intramuscular.
So the protocol of these vaccines is to inject inside the muscle. But when they say inside the muscle, when they mean is inside the tissue. It's not supposed to be injected into a small vein, okay, or a large vein, and we'll go through why. It's supposed to be injected into the tissue, and what's into tissue, it goes into the lymph, and the lymphatic system is going to slowly transport it to the lymph nodes where it's presented to the immune system, and then back to the blood where it's going to trickle, get mixed up, get disseminated, and across the entire body. The injecting it intravenously directly is a problem because the concentration is so important, right? Remember, instead of having one drop diluted into, let's say, 6 liters of blood, you're going to have all the drops immediately and not yet diluted. So what I've done, and go back to the automotive industry, I've used the root cause analyses that are well known in the automotive industry, and notably at Toyota. And it's very simple. It's the why. When you have a child that tells you, why, Dad, why that, whenever you answer that question, they come back and say, why. What the kids do is they want to get to the bottom of it, right? And that's exactly what the root cause analysis is. And that's what I did. I said, I tried to understand what was happening. And one of the um, essential learning or essential trigger has been my son, who thought he was vaccine injured and he wasn't. He was overworked, but like his dad, he works too much. Uh, and so I had him tested, and I had his blood work tested. I had asked him to test for D dimers and inflammatory markers, etc. And he was pristine. He was fine. And so, when you do science, you need to be honest. You need to and to observe the facts. And so I basically it was a realization that you could be harmed or you could be perfectly healthy after the same experience. And that's a very important point. It's a very important point for a number of reasons. One, not everybody's been harmed. Okay, so that's positive. A lot of people have been harmed, unfortunately, but not everybody. But it's also important because it means that there's another factor. Okay, it's quite evident, it's quite obvious that it's the vaccine that's doing something. But the vaccine is just one factor, because since you inject it in some people, they're okay,
Right.
right? It
Yeah.
necessarily means something else. Now, what's really another realization I had was that if you do a deep dive like I have done into vaccine injuries for the past 50 years, despite the fact that consciously or unconsciously, the pharma and medical world has been trying to hide that. Um, the all the vaccines, or most vaccines, have been behaving the same way. So what we saw these past 3 years is we saw it in an extremely acute fashion because we vaccinated a whole age pyramid in 1 month, and then another time in another month, and then 3 times in a year. We never did that. We typically vaccinate children when they're born or at their whatever 6 months or 2 years or whatever the schedule is. So it's spread out over time, over the year, and it's spread out over class age.
Mm-hmm.
So basically it becomes more of a noise. You have these people who have accidents, you have these people who have cancer, you have these sudden infant deaths, but we've basically integrated that as if it were a natural noise or a natural ill
Mm-hmm.
fate.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we did these vaccination, and whenever it occurred, you see it's happening. So it's happened when we did it in 1976 for the swine flu vaccination. Whenever you have an intense vaccination effort, you have these accidents happening. So that happened with the swine flu. It happened for the Gulf War in 1990-91 when they vaccinated all these soldiers. Well, they were, a lot of them were sick, and some of them never went to war. So it wasn't post-traumatic stress disorder.
Or chemical exposure or
Yeah,
biological
yeah, as
weapon
they were
exposure.
saying, exactly. You had it with anthrax, also in the military. You had in the Philippines also with dengue, when Sanofi injected a ton, all the children in Philippines in 2016, I think.
So,
So
so when you do it, so when you do a huge, big group, an identifiable group all at once,
yeah,
all of a sudden, what appears to be, well, what do we know? How do we know that it was bad? Now it becomes obvious. Wow, there was something wrong with this.
yes, exactly. So that's what happened. But the reality of it is most of the vaccines can harm. And there's fundamentally a nuance with vaccines that are protein vaccines. So protein vaccines like the traditional influenza vaccine, the flu vaccine, um, they're not supposed to penetrate cells, so they don't hack the cells. That's why they have adjuvants, the famous aluminium story.
So an
Um,
adjuvant is something that it actually irritates the immune system to get it
exactly.
responding.
It's an activator of the immune system. So it's and so the flu vaccine doesn't. If ever you have you have accidents. You can have accidents, a bit like you can have accidents with steroids, but it's really much a smaller window, and it's fundamentally by saturation. So you also need a bolus, an intravenous injection that's going to create this huge, highly concentrated group, like a swarm of particles. If you can imagine a swarm of particles going down a tube, um, hitting the sides of the walls. You might have that, but it's going to be much smaller and shorter. So it's safer. You still have accidents with influenza vaccines, but it's probably a ratio of 1 to 1,000 versus what you are seeing with the with the mRNA vaccine, the COVID vaccines, but also HPV, MMR, hepatitis B vaccines, which are either attenuated virus vaccines that behave exactly the same, or what are called pseudoviruses or virus-like vaccines that basically trigger the same immune reaction. And so that explains one of the my theories, and one of my statements from the book is that accidents in vaccinations, and we need to go back to the details of it because it's certain. Accidents in vaccinations can explain most modern day illnesses. So they can explain arteriosclerosis. Okay, a vast majority of American adults have arteriosclerosis. It's crazy. Arteriosclerosis can only be done by damaging considerably the inside of your arterial walls. And that doesn't happen with alcohol or with smoking, whatever. You really need to go and do something. Your immune system needs to go and destroy that. So arteriosclerosis, endocrine disorders, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, all the neurodegenerative disease, ALS, of course, leaky gut, and most likely obesity are also, to a certain extent, one contributing factors is those these bolus, these ill-injected vaccines. They're also, and I think I spoke to you last time about autism. Autism are evidently caused by a bolus of vaccines. And why am I saying that? The level of certainty I have is I have one chance out of 1 trillion of being wrong. Why? Because I tested my bolus theory on autism, and it just, without knowing much about autism, and autistic children and adults have many other conditions. And these conditions have been caused by the same bolus, but this swarm of particles that goes and hits your brain and damages your capacity, your emotional capacity, can also hit your ears, and you're going to have hearing impediments, or your eyes, or it's going to hit your intestines, and you're going to have leaky guts.
So it could hit the ears or the eyes, for instance, by damaging the capillary supply
exactly.
to those nerves. So if you're not getting the blood, you're not getting the oxygen, the nerve's not getting what it's need, and now you're getting a malfunction.
Yeah, you have that, and you also transform into sieve-like membranes, basically your membranes that are supposed to be tight, blood tight. And so you have microperforations, which is the reason why you have Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease.
So this is so interesting. So we need to talk about the bolus and the bolus theory, I think, next. But from your view and looking, for instance, in autism at the statistics going back, it seems, crystal clear that it is injury to the elements of the circulatory system, and not from, as you pointed out, not from. I mean, we don't recommend people smoke or drink or all these things, but that's not what's ravaging the pipes in people's circulatory system. It can't. It may not be healthy to smoke and do all those, heavily and do all those things, but it can't really do the level of damage. And your theory also explains another big mystery, which is a lot of us went through the childhood vaccination schedule, and I think we're okay. I mean, maybe I would have been smarter. I don't know, had I not gone through it, but I'm healthy essentially. And yet we see a percentage of people get completely wrecked as a result of vaccination. There's no question about that.
Um,
So the question is always the mechanism, and your theory and your book is the first one that I've seen that actually addresses. I mean, people talk about, the aluminum, they talk about the mercury, but how can you explain 100 kids not being affected from the same injection? There's got to be an addition. I mean, I don't advise getting a mercury injection or an
no,
aluminum,
no.
but yet most people do survive. So we have to understand why certain people
It,
don't.
it took me a little while to understand why my theory was. I mean, a lot of my friends, and John Bodwin, for example, and many, or Kevin McKern, of the friends I've been working with for the past 3 years now, I've been telling you that, Mark, it can't be, as if it were scientific. It can't be the only explanation. Now, and I was like, I didn't know why. Now I understand why. Because there's only one way to bypass the nature's protections.
Let's talk about nature's protection, and let's go really
Okay.
fundamental on physiology. So, here we are basically oxygen beings. Turn off the oxygen for a very short period of time and we're gone, right? And so
Yeah.
the oxygen is distributed via the circulatory system. And as you pointed out early in the call, it goes everywhere. So we have this pipe system, big pipes, medium pipes, tiny pipes, super small pipes. It goes everywhere, and that's our oxygen transport. So any damage to that oxygen transport system is going to be felt and it can be felt anywhere, as you pointed out. It could be in the brain, it could be in the eyes, it could be in the kidney, it could be any place where oxygen is disturbed. So how do you disturb somebody's oxygen distribution system?
Well, the what's let's talk about the protection it's put in place first to try
Okay.
and understand. To avoid poisoning, because we were animals and we were drinking poisonous water. Most of, if you look at the history of man, it's rare. It's a century we've been drinking tap water that's actually decent water. It's not poisonous. And it's true for animals in nature too. So basically, our bodies have evolved to mitigate poison, right? And the best way to do that, first thing is not to intake too much of it, right? So of course you're on your intestines, you're gonna, you're first of all, it's very long, and it's going to integrate it piecemeal, just one bit at a time, not just one go, right? If you take a ton of poison immediately, you die. So that's the first part. The way we ingest, even the way we breathe stuff, is actually sequenced in such a way that we don't get exposure, too
Mhm.
much exposure at one moment. So that's the way we get it, the ingestion, either by breathing or by drinking or eating, is progressive. The second part is, if you look at you know I think it's called the lumen, but it's basically the inside of the tube, right? There's the ratio of what's presented to your body to what's stored inside the tube is tiny. So it basically is about less than 1% or 1%. So at any given time, most of your blood is not being presented to the body. It's actually inside the tube, and at least and it's going to get filtered. So basically 99% of the poison you intake is going to go through the various filters, being the kidneys, the liver, or the spleen. So that's very, very smart in a way from an architecture.
It's like a holding tank, and it's like, okay, before we introduce this to the system, we're
Exactly.
going to
So
test
so
it, run it through some filters, dilute it, which is a very important issue. Dilution.
it's going to dilute it.
Yeah, a silly
Exactly.
phrase, but very useful for this conversation, I think. The solution to pollution is dilution.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, dilution, and we'll go back to that for stem cells later. It's actually the way stem cells actually protect themselves. So you see, so then they get filtered, whatever, and most of the poison gets stuck there. Whatever is not gets away because there's too much poison, then gets disseminated in a similar fashion. Again, 99% stored, 1% distributed on the side. Um, and then at the local level, you know, it gives the opportunity to the ecosystem, the cells, the stem cells, everything to deal with the shock. In a way, the analogy is the bulletproof vest analogy, right? You get somebody shoots a bullet at you, you have a bulletproof vest, you're gonna take the hit, but you spread it across the body and you get a shock. Okay, I'm not again. I'm not saying it's something trivial, but you will heal and you'll be able to manage, just as you do with a bulletproof vest. The direct injection into your bloodstream is like shooting a bullet. What it does is has a magnifying glass effect because you inject into the bloodstream a product that's 270,000 times more concentrated.
Let's talk about that number. And I know you don't use numbers lightly because of your profession. If you showed up with crazy numbers, you wouldn't have been able to do what you do all these years. So that's a huge number that you just mentioned. And you talk about the magnifying glass effect. I'd like to really understand this. So by injecting directly into the bloodstream, something happens that is, I mean, massively unnatural.
Yes, it's absolutely unnatural, and what it does, it's the concept is exposure, a bit like a photograph. Okay, what you're doing is you're exposing your blood vessel walls to something that is circulating into your blood.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two aspects to this exposure. It's a bit like us, we're old fellows. We remember cameras, traditional
Right.
cameras. But I mean, traditional cameras, you have two ways to create to create a picture. You have the aperture and you have the length, right? To let in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the exposure is both the aperture, the concentration, how much concentration of light or how much concentration of vaccine you're going to get and how long it's going to be. So how long is this bolus going to be and how concentrated it is?
Yep.
It's highly concentrated, like 4,000 times. I said 270,000 times. It means that the surface concentration is going to be 4,000 times higher, right? So when you have a normal dose of vaccine at the peak of it, which is 2 hours after, you'll have, let's say, a hit here, okay? And that's about it. And because of its disseminative function, it's going to go everywhere. And maybe there's going to be another hit 30 centimeters later.
When you say a
So
hit, you mean like an abrasion?
prospection,
A what?
a cell that is penetrated by the vaccine.
Gotcha.
You'll have about, by my calculation, my estimate, you have one every foot of capillary, okay? It's manageable.
And that would be a cell that has the collateral damage just as a
It'll
result of
die.
yeah.
It'll die just like that flat that exploded I was telling you about. But
Gotcha.
the plaque next door is going to be fine.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha. And and as you point out, and this is so important, we're exposed to poisons, toxins all day long, right? And we are built to deal with them. So as long as the concentration is within limits, we're okay. But somehow this injection directly with the nanoparticles skews that radically.
Yeah, and so let me finish on this exposure concept because it's a very important one. So the concentration, which is a bit like the aperture, is going to be 4,000 times, right? So the first
4,000 times, I'm sorry, 4,000
higher,
times what? Higher than normal?
than the normal vaccines when you inject it intravenously. So that means
Sorry to interrupt. We're talking about the COVID mRNA is 4,000 times more.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
but that would be true for most vaccines, about in the ballpark figure. So first, the aperture of the camera is going to give you a light that's 4,000 times normal. Okay. So your picture is going to be pretty screwed up. Okay.
Right. There you go. Okay.
Right.
I can
It's
see
like,
that.
you're watching the sun, overexposure when you take a picture, it's the same thing.
Right.
Now, that's just the concentration. Now, imagine then you're going to have this concentration over a length that is longer because it's the bolus. That's the exposure time.
You mean the length of time?
Yes.
Okay.
Because the bolus is going to go through it, and it's going to start 4,000 times higher. So it's going to hit 4 times. And then
Oh, I got you. I got you.
longer
Okay.
because
And it's going to last.
continue.
Instead of something that is first modest and then disperses, it's something huge that doesn't disperse,
Yeah,
and it just
exactly.
rolls through. Whoa.
You're
I got
taking it, you're taking your picture, okay? Instead of taking a picture and snapshot and opening it like this and doing it for a millisecond, you're doing it like this over 10 seconds.
Wow.
That's what's happening. That is exactly what's happening. And that explains the white clot syndrome, for example. The white clot,
Let's talk about what is the white clot syndrome, and how does this explain the white clot syndrome?
okay, so the white clot syndrome is the fact that the embalmers have been finding on cadavers, on dead people, they wanted to embalm. They've been finding what they called their white clots. Actually, they're not white clots. They're like casts. They're like casts of polymer, something very very flexible.
It's
That
almost
is,
like a mold, as if somebody had made a mold, poured it in, and now
exactly.
this thing comes out, but
It's more, but
undertakers have never seen this before.
yeah, it's not it's not. Some people have been saying it's completely new. It's not completely new. I found in the literature some people talk about it in 1945. So
Oh,
it's not something new, but it's massive right now. It's never been that massive
so the
again.
scale of it, the
Yeah.
frequency. Yeah.
What is it? It's fibrin. Fibrin is part of the coagulation. It means that there's been a need to coagulate these walls
And
entirely.
just so we know, coagulation is you cut yourself and you don't bleed to death because your body starts coagulating and slowly heals the cut.
Exactly. And the way it knows that is because the last layer that's been damaged, which is is damaged, right? When you cut, and that's the way it works. And so that's the fact that you have these clots over, very long, or
I
these
got
clots
you. I
very
got you.
long,
There,
means that you've had a huge amount
I
of,
got you. So really, a clot is really a scab.
I'm not quite sure what.
In English we say scab. So if I cut myself, right, I'm going to have like this thing form on the surface, and in English we
Yes.
call that a scab, and everybody
Yeah,
knows what that is, but nobody can see inside themselves, so they don't. But for English speakers, this is like a huge scab on the lining of the
yes.
circulatory system,
And
and that's
and people live with it for some time, which means that it's natural. What's it's natural, but what's not natural is where it's located, and what's not natural is the fact that the healing process has been stopped. And why has it been stopped? Because typically when you have the scab, it dissolves over time.
right.
Right? It dissolves over time because there's something called plasmin that is activated, and that is basically once the stem cells have repaired what needs to be repaired, this sort of band-aid, this natural band-aid needs to disappear. And typically the way it's done is by the local cells, the endothelial cells, so the cells that are on these walls trigger a plasmin activator. Basically, a signal. They send a signal that to the body that this needs to be dissolved, and the thing is dissolved.
Gotcha.
Now, the problem is all these cells have been destroyed. They don't exist anymore.
By this bolus that's gone through.
And
like
therefore,
almost like a rotor rooter. We have a company called Rotor Rooter. It's very famous in America, and it's for you if your pipes are stuck, your toilet's backing up. They come
yeah,
with a machine, and they right. You
oh,
don't
it's
really
almost
want that kind of action going on in your blood
you don't want
vessels.
that. And so that's the reason. So there's no question that all of that is happening. There's two ways you can harm. Let's go back to something people understand. Cancer. You can have cancer. I can have cancer right now and live my life perfectly well. What's dangerous about cancer? Cancer is dangerous because it's a scaling process, right? It's it's harmful because at one point it grows, it grows, and it gets to a point where it's going to damage something. It's
Mhm.
going to damage your liver, your heart, your brain,
Mhm.
whatever, and you're going to die. Harm is done by, but not by an individual hit. Okay, we can deal with that. It's done when you're harmed in a big way. This cluster bombing or this massive bombing I was telling you about, like Dresden. So there are two ways that can happen in the body. Either you're poisoning, you're poisoning an area in a concentrated fashion, which is what we've been talking about, and it's going to kill it, or it's going to clog it and deprive it of oxygen, and that scales a lot, and it's everything that's downstream is going to die. Okay, that's that part of my theory is 100% proven. It's proven, it's tested, it's reproducible, which is the highest standard you can get in science. It's reproduced on on animals, with the COVID vaccines, with with other vaccines also. Another aspect where scale can occur um, is if you damage something and that something becomes big, just like cancer. Um, and the only thing in the body that can do that, there's two things. There's a degeneration of something,
Mhm.
and because you're damaging it all,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
you're not repairing it. So at one point, the damage, and that also occurs, and it's proven for neurodegenerative
Right.
disease.
Right.
But another way to scale is through stem cells, because that's what stem cells do.
Let's talk about the stem cell. What is a stem cell? What makes it different from like a liver cell or a brain cell?
Well, you can have brain cells that are stem cells,
Oh, okay.
but what's different about a stem cell? A stem cell is a cell that is sort of royalty. Um, why is it real? It is the original cells that we've all come from. Basically when our mother's egg is fecundated by our dad, it's called an omnipotent or pluripotent omnipotent stem cell. So they basically can transform into just about anything, right?
Okay. So it's like
And
the raw material that you can turn into
yeah,
anything.
it's a matrix. It is fundamentally our genetic matrix. It
Okay.
is where you will find um, the your genetic material that is closest to what you had as when your parents conceived you.
Great. So
Um,
once we're out of the womb and we're crawling around, walking around, so we've got our liver cells, our brain cells, our kidney cells. Where are these stem cells stored? How do they come to play?
so there's three roles. There's three roles in different locations, but there's three roles. The first role is all your blood cells, your red blood cells. You need to produce. There's two types of cells that need to be produced in huge numbers every day, and that's the red blood cells and the white blood cells. The red blood cells are for you to breathe and carry oxygen and stuff, and the white cells are your immune system. We're talking billions every day.
So
So
that's the cleanup crew, and then the
the
red
cleanup
cell.
crew, exactly.
And we
The
need to
sand,
clean. We're always people. As I always crack up, people are talking about detox diets and stuff. Your body's always detoxing.
yeah, yeah.
You know that we're made to detox. We're built to
Exactly,
detox. We're born to
exactly,
detox. And then
exactly.
and then red, as you point out, that's what's carrying the oxygen which is what keeps every piece of your body alive.
Okay, so those are billions of cells. These stem cells are into the bone marrow. They're in the bone marrow. Okay, that's where it all emerges from. After that, you have stem cells and progenitor cells, are sort of lower ranking cells, are more specialized. That are, and they're, by the way, these stem cells are hidden away from viruses, and I can explain that why later. But
Are they hidden in parts of the body? Is that where they're hidden? I mean,
yes, they're hidden in the bone marrow. The bone marrow is very complicated to address, and the reason they're actually they don't function with oxygen. They function with sugar. They have a different fueling system. It's called glycolysis, and the reason for that is because they're basically away from the blood, away from the source of poison.
Gotcha.
Why? Because they're so important.
So this is like they're like your bomb shelter. You know, if things go wrong, they're going to be protected.
It's well, yeah, they're in the bomb shelter because they're your in the bank that with all the statements, the banking statements that you don't want. Yeah, that's what it is. They have all the material. You can lose some cells in your body, a ton of them. But if you lose, because these cells will rebuild behind. But if you destroy those cells, then you're aging. Okay.
Gotcha.
So going back to where they are, they're in the bone marrow, mostly for white blood cells and red blood cells, and they're also disseminated across the body in the various organs to rejuvenate, to regenerate.
So you have some on your liver, so they're handy in case your liver needs help. They can just reach, grab them, and use them. Got it.
And so depending on the type of organs, there are some organs that have more than others. The liver is loaded with stem cells. The reproductive organs also are loaded. If you don't have stem cells in your testis, you're not going to have sperms. You need, okay. But in some areas they can be a bit dangerous, notably the heart and the brain. Most likely because if you repair too quickly, then you'll have arrhythmias and you die. And so these people have been selected out, or you might have seizures because you have too many new cells that are asynchronous. At least that's my hypothesis. But the one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to poison these cells, right? And my theory in the book, I write a lot about cancer because I had mea culpa, I had missed out completely the potential for cancer with these vaccines. Why did I miss that? Because as I said, normal cells, which are the vast majority of our cells, are sensitive to the immune system. And if they're contaminated by the virus, the immune system will destroy them systematically. There's no exception. Okay? They will get killed. So I did not understand how a poison like the vaccine was going to trigger cancer, because cancer, it means that they're surviving cells.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day I recalled some of the work I had done, because I have worked in cancer before COVID, and I had remembered that actually stem cells were, it's called immune privileged. It makes sense, right? You're okay to sabotage and scuttle stuff that's old furniture, right? But your banking statements, you're gonna when you have a fire and you leave the fire people men come along and say you can't take anything. You're still going to take your computer, your bank statement.
Maybe another analogy is if you lose some money, all right, you lose some money. You don't want to lose your job, because that's where the money
or
comes
something
from.
like that. Yeah, whatever. So they're too precious. Stem cells are too precious, and so they that's the reason they're hidden away. Now, if you get a normal injection, the same thing, this bolus thing, a hit, for you to go and for that particle to go and find stem cells is hidden away is nearly impossible. I'm not
Gotcha.
saying it's not impossible.
It's super unlikely.
It's super unlikely. You might have one chance in a million, 10 million, something like that. But it's very, very unlikely.
It would be the equivalent of a lucky shot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like,
It's
not
very,
something
very.
not something you expect to happen, not something that's set up to happen, but it could happen.
And frankly, the reason for that is we've evolved against that, right? We've evolved for that because we have stuff that's circulating into our blood that is that can be toxic. And so if every time you get that, you get cancer, well, you die faster. So all these people most likely had it before, but they died and they were basically selected away. Um, and so again, that's where my bolus theory becomes extremely potent. Is with a bolus, again, remember, high concentrated longer, you're going to go into those niches in larger number. You're going to reach there and you're going to hit them more often.
Gotcha,
And
gotcha. So just to, if I may, so in the normal course of life, you've got these specialty cells, these stem cells. They're so important because they rebuild you, they build your blood, they build your lymph, your white blood. So they're super important. They're like your bank account, or like your life savings is a better way
yeah,
to.
exactly.
Some of us don't have, but
Yeah.
some people have, they've got their pension, right, that they
Yeah.
tend to live off of. So you don't mess with your pension. All right, you may lose some money here and there, but you're not going to lose sleep over it. So that money, those stem cells are hidden away in a vault. They're not part of the normal circulatory system. And so usually everything's okay unless you throw in a ton of bolus. Wow, then it's going to find, it may, now you've exponentially increased the odds it's going to find
Exactly.
its way. Gotcha.
Exactly. Now this part is conjectural, but it's sustained by a lot of evidence that corresponds to that. And let me tell you why. The when I realized that these cells were immune protected, so stem cells cannot be attacked by the immune system,
Mm.
then I said, okay, but then what happens if they're contaminated? Because if the general system, that we have in all our cells cannot deal with a vaccine, right? And does not have a solution, and the only solution is suicide. Okay, let's understand that. That means that stem cells don't have it either. Okay, there's no reason. If stem cells had it, they would have given it to, or they would have kept it, first of all. They would have a system to clean up the mess.
So wait, so I'm just, so are you saying stem cells don't have a system for cleaning up the mess?
No, they don't.
And
They don't.
they're not built for that. They're not intended for that.
No, actually, no cells can actually deal with it. So what is their solution? What can stem cells do? The only thing that cells can do is basically divide and dilute, right? And what's interesting is, and you'll see where I come from because we've had this conversation on oxygen therapy, but oxygen is a poison to stem cells and actually to all cells. In excess of oxygen,
excessive oxygen.
Excessive oxygen is detrimental to stem cells, specifically more to stem cells than others because they because of glycolysis. And so what they typically do, their defense mechanism against oxygen is division. And that's how that's how you stimulate stem cells.
Oh, okay. So that's how they protect themselves by basically growing. And maybe that's a dilution process. Okay, now I'm bigger.
Exactly.
So this oxygen that's in excess, well, we can handle it because we're bigger.
Exactly.
And that's its only method for protecting itself is growth like that.
Yeah, that's the only thing it knows. It's very, stem cells do two things. They multiply and they keep the genetic material. They don't have any other things they do. They multiply and they protect the genetic material.
So the ability to multiply is baked in the cake. It's exactly what they do. Okay.
And so now you understand. So you have mRNA or another vaccine that comes in into an environment that is meant to replicate very quickly. So it's like a machine.
Oh.
It's a machine that replicates. What happens?
And I'm sorry, we're talking about the stem cells as the machine that replicates.
Yes,
Gotcha. And now mRNA is getting into that place where it doesn't.
Yes. So it's like, you have this pristine white lab plants. Everything is clean everywhere. Everything, the
Like a
processes
fab,
are,
like a silicon chip.
yeah, exactly, like a silicon, and probably even better than that.
Wow.
Okay, and then you basically start pouring in stuff that's not supposed to be produced. Lipids are not supposed to be there. DNA, now we know with Kevin McKern, my friend Kevin McKern, DNA that's not supposed to be there. And last but not least, normally normal cells have a nucleus where the genes, the DNA is, and the chromosomes are protected, right? There's another layer of protection. But in stem cells, when they replicate, this nucleus disappears.
Oh, okay.
Right? It dissolves so that the chromosomes can divide, duplicate, and separate. Right. So my theory here is twofold. One, you're going to create a mess inside, right? Which is inevitable.
And this is the injury to the blood vessels.
No. I'm talking about the stem cells.
Oh, so now we're talking about, okay, so you're going to create a mess in the stem cell space.
There's two types of harm that's going to happen. One is this high dilution that we've been talking about, which is the definition of cancer, right? Because what you're going to create is an unneeded need for stem cells, right? And if that stem cell is a high-ranking stem cells, you're going to replicate very high-ranking stem cells up here that are going to create a real estate or a machinery that is going to react to stimulus unneeded. So basically, it's like you have 10 cooks in the kitchen instead of having one, and you order a burger and you get 10 burgers. That's the definition of cancer.
Okay, because you've invaded this normally pristine space with stimulation it's not designed to accept, and you've caused it to go haywire, basically.
Yeah, you've caused it to create an infrastructure of cell-producing cells that are not supposed to be there.
And it thinks it's protecting its, well, it is in fact protecting itself because it's been assaulted.
Yeah, it's been protected itself. So that's the first part. But the second bit of it is the genetic part. It's the fact that you're going to have proteins, and you're going to have amino acids and stuff like that are going to be in contact with your chromosomes as they are supposed to separate into the second one. It's a highly calibrated process.
Okay.
It's a highly calibrated process. So what can occur? Well, of course, in some cases, there's going to be a protein that's going to break one of the, I remember what it's called, the strings, whatever they're called, mares or whatever. The term escapes me, but basically you have like ropes pulling on the chromosomes, the chromatids, right? And so if ever you break one or you don't have separation because for some reason or another, you're blocking the enzyme that's doing the separation or whatever, you're going to end up with having two chromosomes on one side, 0 on the other, right? That's the definition of trisomy or monosomy, depending on where you're at. So you have Down syndrome. You're going to have breakups because, of course, sometimes it's going to pull and it's going to break the thing. You're going to have half a chromosome, or you're going to have new material that's going to integrate in places it's not supposed to be. Okay, so either because you've broken up the chromosomes and it's gone to another side, or because you've brought new DNA, like the plasmid DNA that Kevin McKern has been talking about. So, a lot of my colleagues have been talking. I was having a conversation with Jessica Rose earlier, and she was like saying, okay, so you're basically saying that there's no need to bypass the the nucleus membrane because there's no membrane. It's
Oh, right. Okay. Unlike a normal cell, which has that
exactly.
protective membrane, these stem cells have a different structure because they have a different function and a different nature.
And,
Yeah.
and well, during that process where they split,
Yeah.
where we know this the split to divide, then basically the
The door is
material
wide open.
the door is open. It could the material, and so you can reintegrate indeed material. I frankly speaking, I was super upset at vaccinologists who have not thought this through because it's I mean if I'm an MBA, okay, I'm not but it makes complete sense. The physical aspects of it is obvious. You know, binding is all about chemistry. Biochemistry is all about binding stuff that you know have affinities. Called affinity. It's basically capacity. It's like magnets. You know, so you're going to have new magnets into this pristine process that's supposed to be extremely clean. It's very clear that this is bound to happen if there is a contamination of a stem cell.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
There's no
Wow.
surprise. There's no surprise you have all these people having cancer today.
Gotcha. Wow. I think I really understand this. So to take this back, you know, in the ideal world, it's an intramuscular injection. It like you use the example of the bag of liquid that they give you in the hospital. It drips in one little drip at a time. And as you pointed out, you know, our bodies are designed to deal with the salts all the time, and we're used to it, but it depends on how much we're being assaulted and how long. And so these injections that go straight into the bloodstream inadvertently, but let's talk about how it's almost inevitable. Like
Yeah,
you know, some people
that's a very important point.
some people get hit harder than others. Now, you got a sort of a revelation when you studied people who are using steroids and doing steroid injections.
Yeah,
Now, these are people that are very careful with how they inject because they're injecting themselves all the time. They
yeah.
are sort of, on one level, health conscious, I guess. That's a whole nother issue. But they're being very careful. They're very thoughtful about it. They're often professional athletes. And yet things go wrong even with that level of care. And I'm going to guess that their level of care is like this. And when you go to Walmart to get an injection from somebody that's not even trained in medicine, which is how we do it in the States, the level of care is much less. So what happens to steroid injectors, even when they're very careful? What can happen?
Okay. Well, they there's a phenomenon called trend cough.
Trenkov?
Trend cough. So trend for trembolone. You can go online. Trend
Oh,
TREN cough.
Trem cough. Okay.
Trend cough. Trenbolone. Fundamentally, the steroids. Those steroids are vasoconstrictors. So when there's enough of it that touches the endothelium, they
And
instruct
then,
the
sorry, the endothelium is the inner lining of the blood vessels?
yes.
Okay, got
Uh,
it. And
and
by the way, your blood vessels, for people that don't know, they can tighten, they can open, they can tighten different substances, they
exactly.
can open, different substances make
And
them
it
tighten.
and it's that and it's this, those cells on those linings that reacts to it. So anyhow, occasionally in about 2% of the cases, uh, they inject enough intravenously to actually get a very acute uh, constriction of your capillaries in the lungs. So during 3 or 4 minutes, you can hardly breathe and you're coughing your heart out. And some people die, okay? They get called POM, which is pulmonary oil-mediated embolism, and you basically die. So what's important in this for me was that doctors had been telling me it was impossible to have intravenous injections, and I had the proof
Right.
on a large scale. And there were studies, actually, some studies were erased from the internet, to be honest. So it's really, really annoying.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Okay.
there was a study with about 2,000 injection of steroids to bodybuilders, and that showed that despite aspiration, despite watching out, they were not in blood vessel, they were still doing it that way. Now,
And
I,
so I'm so sorry to interrupt, but aspiration means, you know, you put the needle in and then you pull the plunger out. If blood is apparent, then you know, oops, we hit something. We better
Yeah.
try again. Because I want to go back to the fundamental thing here. The dream is that it goes into the muscle and that it disseminates very, very slowly. You don't get the bolus. You don't get all the damages that you've talked about. But the reality, and maybe we'll throw the picture up here, is it's not like we have a few big pipes here. We've got gazillions of these things, and some of them you call them micro, for what the term was, but we have micro vessels.
Yeah,
So it's almost
venules or arterioles. Venules or arterioles. Yeah.
yeah, so it's almost impossible to stick a needle into any part of the body and not hit the circulatory system.
It is impossible. And so here's another observation. I really always anchor my work on observation. There is two studies, one in Basel University Hospital that was done by Professor Mueller and his team. And there's another team, I don't remember, in Japan. In all cases, they found that every single vaccinated people had heart damage. And it was tiny, but it was sufficient.
So let me make sure I get this. 100%. There's
100,
always heart damage.
yes, 100% of people had tiny, minute elements,
Now, is this
microperforations, little elements of inflammation. Now,
is this the mRNA or any vaccination?
that was for the mRNA.
Okay, gotcha.
But I suspect that's true for others. Now, what does that say? That means that the dissemination thing, every 1 centimeter, 30 centimeter or foot, or that I've been telling you about, didn't work in 100% of cases. And so I've tried to understand that. And to tell you the truth, I said, oh, bummer, you're stupid. But I'm not the only one. It looks like the entire world is stupid. This is very simple. Let me try another analogy. I don't know if you have ever tried to unclog a sink that's basically blocked with a plunger, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you have that experience, and it's not very nice, you take these huge plungers, you take the plunger and you push very violently, and the idea is the pressure is going to go down and it's going to push on the wherever the blockage is and get rid of it. Now, once in a while, and quite often actually, the blockage is so sturdy that the pressure different. There's no way the pressure can go. So the pressure you've exerted downwards, thinking there's the only place it can go is down, actually comes back at you via the overflow hole, right? Because there's a pressure differential, and we know that whatever pressure you exert somewhere,
got to go somewhere, right?
it's got to go somewhere.
Yeah.
So now you have to project yourself into. You should show that this image from the Las Vegas show that I used in an article not so long ago. But you need to understand. So your muscle is tissue. It's basically cells inside a liquid. That's what it is. It doesn't look like it, but it's inside. There's a liquid, interstitial liquid. There are cells, and there are blood vessels circulating all everywhere. When you insert a needle in there, the probability is 100% that you're going to cut one, right? And so what's going to happen? Well, when you're injecting the vaccine, it's going to go like a sphere like that. It's going to expand in the liquid or in the tissue in a sphere-like fashion based on the pressure differential. Right?
You mean spiral? Spiral?
No, a sphere.
Oh, sphere. I'm sorry, sphere. It's going
to
okay.
Sphere. You inject the needle. The pressure is going to be extremely important here, and it's going to expand most likely as a sphere because the pressure is going to equalize everywhere.
Gotcha.
Okay. So it means that it can go back up And it means that, and the pressure differential is enormous compared to the pressure you have in a blood vessel. And then a portion of the vaccine is going to go direct. It's science. I mean, there's no question about that.
It's physics. It's physics.
It's physics. It's basic physics. We've known about that for centuries now, and a fourth grader can understand that. So you cut it, and I made a calculation. I can't be 100% certain that my calculation is correct, but I tested it. It looks pretty darn good. What you're going to have is the further away you are, the smaller the dose, right? Because it's because first of all, it's going to be diluted, and the length is going to be smaller. So within for the Pfizer vaccine, which is 0.3 millimeter, the limit's going to be 0.8.
I'm sorry, what's that number? What?
The dose that's injected is 0.3 millimeter.
Milliliter.
Yes, it's
milliliter.
Tiny.
So tiny amount.
Tiny amount. 0.3 millimeter is
milliliter. Milliliter.
Milliliter, yes.
Yeah, not meter. Okay, I just want to make sure I get that. Okay.
No, milliliter. And the Moderna one is 0.5. Okay, you need to fit the 30 billion more in there.
Those are those nanoparticles we were talking about earlier. Okay.
Exactly. So they're going to expand within about about a centimeter. And the closer you are, you've cut that vessel closest to the needle's tip, the bigger the dose, and the longer the bolus.
So more's going to get right into the bloodstream right away, so instead of that all-important slow dissemination from the muscle.
But you have to realize that you don't need a big blood vessel to inject the quantity, because the needle is extremely thin too, right? It's like 1 millimeter. So if you have hit a vessel that's 0.2 or 0.5 millimeter, which is relatively is not that big, you could inject a very significant portion of the dose directly and create that bolus. Now, I want people to realize that about a quarter size hole in your aorta is about 60 to 70,000 cells, right?
The surface area.
The surface area.
So if you envision your aorta, you're one of these blood vessels, and an area the size of a quarter, that's six. That the one is it one layer of cells?
Just one layer of cells.
So the 60,000 cells, one layer deep. Okay.
Yeah.
On a quarter size space in that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can die of that. And actually, in the brain, and a stroke or an aneurysm rupture is going to be much smaller than that.
That's enough to kill somebody.
Yes, of course, that's enough. So that's, you see what I'm talking. Put that into perspective versus the 10 billion and the 40 billion. We're talking 0.0006% of the dose. So if you see, even that is that's why I really got scared with the idea of using this technology where T cells attack infected cells, because the amount that's going into your vascular system is enormous. And if ever for a reason your vascular system is not disseminating properly, you start having serious problems, Alzheimer's, Parkinson, all of that. And we know that's what's happening.
Wow. Yeah, so the fantasy that, we can just put something in the muscle and it's going to safely disseminate might work functionally, but it can go wrong very easily. And then when you add to the idea of, okay, we're going to put 10 billion nanoparticles, or the other one was 40 billion?
Yeah.
Or 40 billion nanoparticles into somebody's body, now you're just multiplying the chances of trouble. And so you're not only abrading and injuring the interior lining of your blood vessel, you're also creating this super abundance of this stuff, which we're not designed to. We can handle viruses, we can handle minor amounts of toxins, we can handle all kinds of things. We can't handle a bolus careening through our blood vessels, tearing up the lining of the blood vessel, right?
Oh, yeah, we can't. That's why Americans and a lot of Europeans also have arteriosclerosis. It's a very clear sign of that. Now, hear me out on this.
Yes.
If again, you have this idea of this spur, the further away, of course, most of the cases are, the vessel is far away, right? Or right, the big ones.
You mean the vessel that gets injured?
Yeah,
Or,
the vessel that gets ruptured by the tip of the needle.
and that is far away from what?
From the tip.
From
If the further away it is, the safer it is. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Um, but the problem is it's a Russian roulette. The more you inject, the more chance you have of having an injection that's going to be close, right? I consider that about one time out of 20, you get close. You get something close enough that you're harming people, okay? And you're not going to be able to repair. Now, that's, I don't know if it's ever acceptable, but if you get one or two shots or maybe 6 shots like we were having when we were kids, it's not going to be visible. I mean, it's dangerous, but you wouldn't, and that's why you didn't have autism, when we were kids, well, that's why you didn't have obesity when we were kids either. What you're seeing is as you're multiplying and generalizing these vaccines, and you have kids that have 50 shots, 80 shots. I think I had done a calculation, 80 shots by 18 years old, something like that.
Mm.
Well, if you have 5% chance of harming people, the chance of not being harmed is going to be 95% at the power of 80. I suggest everybody does the calculation, but 95% to the power of 80 is 0.
Well, let's use something that everybody can understand. You get 2 pair of dice, you roll them once, okay, something's going to come up. But let's say you want double 6, which is let's say that's the bad thing. Well, if you just keep rolling those dice over and over and over again, you're going to hit double 6. So stop rolling the dice.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Wow.
exactly that.
Wow.
It's exactly that.
So we've gone a little bit over our original time plan, but one thing people can do is absolutely make sure you get the needle secret and talk about this book, talk about this idea. You might want to watch the video again. It's not a complicated idea, but it has a lot of moving parts, and it may take a while to synthesize the whole thing. But Marc's laid it out very clearly. Basically, we are designed to do all kinds of things, but processing large bolus clumps of stuff coursing through our circulatory system and maybe even accessing our stem cell storage units. This is not something we're designed to do, and we will have a system failure if we do it. So, Marc, what can people, in addition to getting the book, and I urge everybody to get it for multiple reasons, get it so that you understand this, so that next time you're coerced into doing something, or that someone's attempting to coerce you or your family into doing something, you have something firm to stand on, at least for yourself. You can share this with your neighbors. You can share this with family. You can buy a copy for your library, please. That would be a great thing to do. And talk it up with people. Because believe me, CNN and the BBC are not going to be talking about this, right? So it's up to us. What can people do who think they've had an injury? I mean, you're not a doctor. You're not posing as a doctor. This is purely an informational, speculative call. But what kind of things can people do to help themselves?
Okay, so there's a few things. First of all, to be certain. If you don't have cancer today, you're probably not going to get cancer, right? It starts immediately. This idea that it's going to take 5 years, et cetera. So cancer people who have cancers or neoplasms, they have them. You might have faster ones than other turbo ones, et cetera. But fundamentally, if you don't have cancer today, you're most likely not going to have cancer, except
As
if
a
you were,
result of this particular thing. Yeah.
especially if you've had it a year ago. So I mean, that's very important. The other thing is if you don't have any symptoms, you're most likely out of the woods. Okay, there is the only thing that can happen over time is degeneration, so neurodegenerative disease when the immune system starts to age, like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And in my opinion, there's really no real tests apart from seeing if it's starting to damage. But there are ways to solve that, and we're going to talk about that now. That's the first part. It's important to know that most likely 85 to 90% of people who are vaccinated are going to be okay. Okay, they're going to be okay. But there's still 10% of people who are going to be harmed, who are going to have Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, and other things that are not necessarily obvious as being vaccine harm. Like, for example, I believe that obesity is tied to the fact that vaccines have hindered the gut-blood barrier. People have leaky guts, and because they have leaky guts, they cannot select what they ingest. So normally, you can eat a ton of food. Your body is capable of selecting what it needs. I personally believe that the fact that you would have leaky gut, if you eat too much, if you don't have a proper diet, then you'll become obese because of that. It's a combination of factors. So what can you do? I'm not going to talk about cancer. Cancer is a bit complicated. Of course, what's interesting is to have an approach that is stem cell centric. So it explains why ketogenic would work, because if you reduce the sugar, you're going to hit on some of the stem cells that have been harmed. There's work to be done there, but I believe if you have solid tumors, it might be useful to have ketogenic disease diet,
Yep.
reducing your blood sugar to the extent. And the other thing that needs to occur is stimulating your immune system, because in case of cancer, what saves your life is your immune system killing off the cancer cells, and that can be done in a variety of ways.
The ketogenic diet is a whole nother conversation, right?
Yeah.
But basically, I'm going to present my simplified version of this, which is that if you think of how we came along, we were not sitting around eating potato chips and bread and certainly not stuff that was made with canola oil and cottonseed oil. I mean, this is new in the last 150 years. This just didn't exist. We weren't eating as many carbohydrates. We certainly weren't eating sugar. I mean, until the Atlantic slave trade, sugar cost as much as cocaine. I mean, it was not consumed.
This is borderline my cup of tea. I have the theory that the body selects what it needs, maybe a bit more. But in any case, for the cancer side of things, if you having a stem cell centric strategy means that you're going to attack elements of the stem cell. So ketogenic is important, and then making sure that you through a variety of strategies that your immune system is top notch constantly.
So adequate rest,
avoiding
unnecessary stress,
vitamin B, C, and D,
cleaning up your environment. If you're living, you may need
oxygen therapy is extremely good because it boosts your white cells. And you could try also, I think there's fever strategy. So basically you simulate fever that triggers, so you have sauna and stuff like that.
So far infrared sauna could be
Yeah,
helpful.
yes.
What's your thought on what they call intermittent fasting? And I call it just not eating so much.
Mm.
What
I think it works. I mean, okay. So one of the ways I've been testing my theory is by uh, it by validating a number of things. So I think intermittent fasting can be very helpful because one of the mechanism of harm that I describe in my book is the microperforation of your blood vessels. What people don't really know, and I didn't know that a few years back, now I know, but is that this layer is a filter that is basically the source of life in all your organs, in the sense that it protects these organs from things entering, but it also regulates what enters and what gets out. So without the endothelium, you can't regulate your hormones.
and that
Uh,
and that and the endothelium again is the layer of cells inside the various pipes we've got, the circulatory
exactly.
pipes. And it's almost its own organ with its own kind of
Exactly, it
brain.
is an organ.
Yeah.
It is. It's a highly precious organ. It's probably as precious as the heart and the brain. Um, and if you poke holes in it, you're going to let things in that you're not supposed to. So if it's in your testis, you're gonna let in T cells that are going to destroy your sperm, and your sperm count is going to drop. If it's in the brain, you're going to let in albumin, and you're going to have amyloids, and you're going to have Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. Um, it's fundamentally one of the big discovery of the Bolus theory of my discoveries is that microperforation. It's the same concept, cookie cutter, concept. You basically have a sieve-like surface that lets in or lets out anything. It explains, for example, uh, endocrine disorders where you're hyper producing. So they call it hypersecretion, but it's really not hypersecretion. What it is you're not controlling your hormones anymore. You're just letting it out.
Gotcha.
There's
Gotcha.
there's a story of two teenagers who died 2 years ago after on day 3 and 4 of their after their vaccination, and what they died of is an adrenaline shock. So when they did the autopsies, they're basically their hearts were basically tight. They had constricted as if somebody had given them a shot of adrenaline. And basically, my theory, and I'm pretty sure that's what happened, is that the adrenal gland was poked, and basically epinephrine that was stored was just downloaded into the bloodstream, went to the heart, and killed them.
Gotcha. We always need mechanism to understand, okay, all right, something happened. How did it happen? And to understand the mechanism, you have to understand how the system works. And
Exactly.
then you can envision, okay, how would the system break in order for this crazy, unprecedented thing to happen? So one part of your book, I think a reason people should get it, another reason, is just to understand how we're put together. The things that Marc and I have been talking about in this call are not, we talk about, people talk about better diet and they talk about this and that, but they don't talk about how you're put together, how you're made, the nature of your stem cells, where they are, what their function is, the importance of oxygen, the importance of your circulatory system, the fact that it goes everywhere, the fact that you don't want to mess with it, the endothelium layer, how intelligent it is for allowing, the right things to come in and the wrong things to stay out. All these little things, so-called little things or seemingly little things, are really important for us to know, and they can actually guide us in developing a lifestyle that supports that and also avoid things that could damage it. Now, this whole business of injecting things into the human being is only about 150 years old. I mean, this is not a new practice. This is not an old practice.
It's quite dangerous, but I think there's two aspects I want to react to on what you just said. One aspect is around our healing capacity. So
Yes.
I think it's fundamental to understand that, first of all, this is poison at a small dose that we're injecting, and we have an enormous capacity to heal. And I want, on the positive side, um, a lot of people have been injured. By my calculation, nearly 700 million across the globe have been injured.
And it's a
Uh,
spectrum of injury, obviously. Some of
yeah, it's
it's
a
going to be very
spectrum.
minor, some of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a different spectrum. But people, sometimes it's irreparable if you die, or if you've necrosed an entire organ, you're not going to rebuild it. But in many instances, in many cases, people can actually heal, and and they can help their body. And it's a discussion we've had together several times. I discovered that I have no interest whatsoever. First of all, I'm broke as hell, but I have no personal interest in oxygen therapy. But oxygen therapy and Bolus theory match extremely well. I explained very well why it works, um, and when it's going to work and when it's not going to work. And what is oxygen therapy? As I mentioned, we were talking about stem cells. It's about stimulating stem cells without damaging them, because oxygen is not going to bind to the chromosomes and damage it. But it's what's interesting is if you overdose a bit on oxygen, if you, for example, if you um, hyperventilate by doing exercise, or if you start breathing pure oxygen, or if you go into a hyperbaric chamber or hyperbaric tent, and you breathe pure oxygen, you're going to increase your oxygen in your bloodstream to 7-10 times what you have typically, and it's going to it's going to trigger your stem cells to multiply. But they're going to be healthy, and they're going to start
So they're going to multiply in a healthy way.
in a healthy way, and they're going to start circulating into your body, and basically repair everything that needs to be repaired. And it takes time. It takes time because, of course, a lot of people have had a lot of shots and also have damaged themselves. For example, I would need that for my tendon here. But it's going to repair progressively over time. It typically, for a normal microperforation damage, like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and stuff like that, it's typically 40 hours of hyperbaric chamber. And I'm very excited. It was something that I was very uncomfortable with when I started writing my book almost a year ago. Is I didn't have I had a solution in terms of how to prevent this from happening, but I felt we were leaving on the side of the road billions of people who've been harmed these past 30 years or 40 years. And by doing this deep dive into oxygen therapy, and we both, I know you've been talking about that too, doing the big deep dive, understanding the relevancy and the deep science. It's not bullshit science. It's actually, they've been working on this for 50 years, and people have proven what I've just talked about, and then testing it. Even though a lot of people have been trying to discount it by doing cheap trials of 2 or 3 hours and saying, well, it's not really significant. There's a little effect, but in a typical fashion, it does work. There's multiple cases in enormous number of illnesses ranging from cancer, Down syndrome, autism, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS. Especially degenerative disease. If you can catch them early on with that, you'll stop the degeneration. So for me, it's. I think we're at a turning point. I hope my book actually makes it big, because I think it's a turning point. It goes. I mean, to a certain extent, the illnesses we've been talking about are generic. I mean, you can have the same ones created by other toxins, other injections, other problems with
Yeah.
viruses will do the same thing.
Yeah.
So to a certain extent, oxygen therapy is going to work for a lot of other things. And it works, for example, for patients who suffered deeply from COVID. It works for, I was having a conversation with a friend that's supporting me actively in Australia, and she was telling me of an aunt who had she was suffering from the lungs. So she had lung cancer because of asbestos. Typically, you die after 2 years. And she was telling me her aunt was breathing pure oxygen because of that problem. She breathed pure oxygen for 2 years, and she was healed after 2 years.
One of the original discoveries about hyperbaric oxygen in particular was its efficacy for severe burns.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, what could be more dramatic of an injury? And what's the mechanism? Well, you stimulate stem cells, so now you've got material with which to repair this horrific damage. So, and I don't want to get too gross or clinical, but I'm trying to think of how a polite way to let's put it this way. I have a friend that has a clinic in England with a large, she's been doing this for decades. And I just happened to run into somebody who was a patient. We were just chatting, and she'd had a very severe operation, and it was not healing until she did hyperbaric. And the doctors were just they couldn't even understand, why are you healing now all of a sudden? What did you do? And it makes sense. If hyperbaric stimulates stem cells, and stem cells are the material with which we rebuild ourselves, well, and the body knows what to do with the stem cells. I kind of look at it as I look at this body as more of an electrical system. So let's say you have an injured area. Well, it's sending out a signal, right? And there's a cell, the stem cell goes, oh, I hear a noise, I hear a signal. I'm going to go to that particular part, and I'm going to do my thing.
I mean, I have a view of masons, laying bricks, and it takes time. That's why I've been telling people, first of all, it's not that bad to be progressive, because as I was saying, in the heart, if you repair the heart too quickly, you could have an arrhythmia and die. Or you could have a seizure or stuff like that. So there's a reason why there's not too many stem cells in the heart and the brain, right? We have to look at nature, observe why, people who had too many died, right? They were selected out. So that's important. You could do it progressively over time. It takes time. It's good that it takes time. And you need to, the only thing is you need to persevere. It takes some months. Some people can't. I mean, having a chamber is complicated. There are tents in the homes that you can use. There are sort of hyperbaric tents that go 1.4 bars, I think, atmosphere. Sorry. The idea is that they're not going to be selective, so they're not going to repair one. If you're suffering from Alzheimer's, they're not going to focus only on Alzheimer's, because of course you're going to have some repair to have been done in the intestines, in the ear, in your tinnitus, etc. But it works. I mean, I my next door neighbor. She's a very old, sweet lady, 95 years old. She has her daughter-in-law, who's American, and I think they live in Chicago or something, has tinnitus. And she was telling me, it's like, do you think what you're telling me should work with tinnitus? I said, yeah, I'm sure it does. I'm going to go and verify, but I could tell you, I'm pretty sure of my theory. After the vaccine, tinnitus, there's a ton of them. It's the same thing, microperforation and inflammatory process. And I went, and it took me like 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes, I had like 5 articles stating that hyperbaric oxygen therapy is a solution. Now, the problem with hyperbaric therapy is it's a bit hard to do. There's 150 centers in the U.S., which is certainly not enough for we're talking 100. We're talking probably 100 million people harmed in the U.S. Okay, to a degree or another. So there's no way we can do that way. I personally think the solution is going to be oxygen therapy, basically breathing oxygen, uh, 1 hour a day for 3 months or 2 months, doing that, or 2 hours a day when you're watching TV or something. You have this oxygen concentrator in your home, and you're breathing this. You breathe for half an hour. You stop 5 minutes for security reasons. Then you take another 30 minutes, maybe an hour and a half. All this research I've seen are fine. There's one research I've looked into for seizures, because they're the only risk, the only accidents that have occurred are seizures. Of course, we're talking people who have harmed, so they're bound to have seizures. The proportion is like, I think, if you don't do these 30-minute pause every 30 minutes, it's like 2.5 to 3 seizures every 10,000 hours. Okay, so it's relatively small.
And that may be people, as you said, who already had a proclivity.
Yeah, but
Just not-
apparently on the literature I've read is, if you pause 5 minutes every 30 minutes, you drop that to 1 every 10,000 hours, or 1.2 or 1.3 every 10,000 hours, which is nothing. Um, Ideally you want to do that in a place where you have people with you, but I was reading this wonderful lady. I don't remember her name. She was taking care of her daughter who has Down syndrome, and they were taking her daughter. They were putting her to sleep into the chamber, into this sort of tent, so for an hour and a half. Then they would come as she was sleeping, taking her out, putting her in her bed. And then at 5 a.m. or in the morning, or 6 a.m., they would put her back for an hour and a half. So that kid was getting 3 hours in a day of oxygen therapy, and what she's saying, and you can there's her case report is online. You can find it. She was saying that she cured her daughter from Down syndrome.
I've seen cases like that too. It's incredible. But if you think about it, the
It's
body
complete change.
has this tremendous capacity to heal if we don't over assault it, and if we support it. I mean, what a concept, right?
Exactly
Don't,
that.
don't vandalize the thing that you want to serve you, and help it out a little bit. So we could talk a lot about this topic, but I think people now have an indication of where to go. Obviously, this is a global problem. Marc and I and people listening aren't going to solve this for the whole world tomorrow, but
Yeah.
we can point a direction. And I think the most important thing, I want to bring this full circle, is I said, we're talking about the biological viability of human beings, not because human beings are weak, not because human beings aren't well designed, but because we are assaulting the body with these ill-advised injections. And Marc has developed a theory that explains the mechanism by which these injuries are occurring. Also, why are the injuries occurring to not everybody? We have to explain that. Nobody's ever been able to explain that. And the other thing that people have not been able to explain, other than the bolus theory, is why are we getting such a wide variety of injuries? Why is one guy get it in the heart, another guy gets in the brain? We now have an explanation that makes biological sense. We're not having to re-envision the human being or make up things that that have never been observed. We're talking about, if you understand the actual plumbing and function of the human being, you understand what not to do and what to do. And so the book is The Needle's Secret. I really think, if we're going to live in a world where people are going to try to coerce us into getting an injection every day or a week or month or quarter, or whatever these maniacs have in mind, we need to have this book in our hands and know the risk that we're facing if we do that. Marc, thank you for the great research you've done, and the thinking and the time you put into this, and of
Sure.
course the time sharing with us. The book, again, is The Needle's Secret. I want to urge everybody to get at least one copy. Nothing says you can't get more than one. You've got a
Yeah.
library. Well, seriously, I mean,
No, I want to, before we end, I want to send a message to everybody. The message is the following: I need apostles. I need relays. You're a friend. You've been very helpful in helping me. But I've been fighting this for 4 years now. I've been fighting this against everybody. Paid a big price for it. Hopefully, it's worth it. We're faced with the risk of apocalypse. I mean, I don't like threatening people or fearing. I've been trying to on the contrary, bring people telling them, not to fear. But you're right. If if they continue accelerating on, everybody is going to. I have that at the end of the book. I simulate how many people will be damaged, and it's ridiculous. I mean, it's ridiculous. So it's time that what's really interesting about the Bolus theory, but it's first of all, it's easy to understand. It's very easy to understand. We're bypassing nature's protection. Okay.
Right.
And so the message I have for everybody is, okay, buy my book. Yeah, as many as you can because I'm broken. So that's a personal message. I'm really, really in trouble. I've gone way too far. My friends tell me I'm crazy, but I did that because I was seeing the abyss we were running into. But fundamentally, what I'm asking beyond buying the book is that everybody realize it's about self-preservation. It's something that we've lost as civilization. We're into our, we're comfortable with heating and with food and electricity and computers and everything, but we're missing out on our survival instinct. And I start my book um, with the fear of the needle. With every children has a fear of the needle. It's ingrained in our
Yeah.
body.
Yeah.
And when you look at nature, you look at how animals and have everything is embedded into our DNA. I start by saying the book is maybe there's a good reason.
Right.
Maybe it's self-preservation. And so I want us first to get back to that self-preservation, and then I want you to be the Bolus theory advocates, because I can't. I mean, first of all, nobody's inviting me anywhere apart you, and a few rare people invite me. Um, and the Bolus theory is the only reproducible theory. It's the only theory that have been tested over and over for the past 3 years now, and it still stands. And it's not. It's consistent. It's consistent on all areas. So you're not going to be ridiculed by anybody, even a doctor. Um, but more importantly, it's going to empower you. It empowers when you're capable to understand, when you're capable of understanding what's happening or what's happened to you, what's happened to your friend, or what's happening to someone. It becomes so easy in a way that doctors can't today. Let's be very clear. I mean, I was telling you the story about epinephrine, adrenaline, heart, these kids. It's a friend of mine, Nick Hudson from Panda, who said, Mark, what do you think of that? And it literally took me 4 minutes to decipher this. 4 minutes, okay? And it was pretty complicated. I read the autopsy. I said, well, this is how it's working.
Hmm.
And I'm sure that's what happened. So it's an empowerment tool. And so one, I hope you'll read it and ask questions, reach out to me if you don't understand. One, and two, spread the word. Word of mouth has to be. We're a tribe, we're a global tribe. This is about the safety of our children, the health of our children. And so I hope you will hear my message today. Is there, first of all, there's hope for health. We can be healthy. We should be healthy, and we're not. So we need to change that. And to change that, we need to face it's not an evil, because it's the dystopia. It's collectively we're dystopian. So we need to address reality, and that's what I've done single-handedly on my own. Now I'm having more, people help me out, like Ken, like a few others, but I need much more, and we need a wave of people who understand that my book is, first of all, extremely solid. There's a lot of work. I apologize if my English isn't perfect, I did my best. It's not my first language. Um, but it's extremely robust, and I'm revolutionizing so many things: cancer, treatment, therapy, understanding of endocrine disorders, endometriosis, Alzheimer's, Parkinson, etc. So it's there's a lot of hope. I start my book with both I actually end the book with hope. I believe my book is about hope, but hope is something that we need to act upon as collectively. So I hope everybody, please come and help me, either by spreading the word, by understanding the Bolus theory, um, and feel free to reach out to me. I'm always open to explain it better. It's not necessarily always simple to explain. I hope I did a decent job today to explain as much as possible.
How can people get in touch with you via Substack? I know you have a Substack page.
Yeah, I have a Substack. I'm setting up my website. It's not there yet, even though on the book cover I have the bolustheory.com website. But yeah, you can contact me on Substack on my, I'm going to change the name of the website. It used to be, it's called the COVID Mythbuster series. I'm going to call it the Bolus Theory series because it's really what I'm talking about mostly now.
Great.
So yeah, they can contact me.
Go to so for the time being, go to Substack, become a Substack subscriber. That way Marc will know how to reach you. He'll send you a message, and then the website will be ready at some point, and then you'll probably announce it to your Substack list, and that's
Yeah,
how.
yeah. I announced to my Substack list the publishing of the book, which was yesterday. Um, some people are asking me why it's not on Kindle. It's supposed to be on Kindle. I've been waiting 5 days for Amazon to authorize it. For some reason, they're not.
Well, it's
So
very odd. It's easier. Strange. I have experience with this. It's easier to get them to accept a print book. They take more
really,
time on Kindle. Yeah, no,
I
this is quote normal.
yeah, it's very strange. That was very strange. Anyhow, so the print is done. The Kindle is waiting. Some people have had asked me for Audible, which I hadn't planned, but it looks like it's something I need to do. I'm going to ask you how to do that, to be honest. Um, and the book is a lot of people. I've had like 10 people read the book so far. Um, the book is the first part is reads like a novel. The second part is more like scientific, but I've added a lot of analogies, so it's supposed to be accessible. And you're not supposed to, and, if you're interested in cancer, you can go to the cancer part at the end. If you're interested in autism, you can go to the autism part. You don't need to, the latter part, the last fourth part is about each single one of those big modern day illnesses and how they relate, how they're consistent with Bolus theory, and also how can oxygen therapy help.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So the book again is The Needle's Secret, available now on Amazon. Again, we encourage everybody to get it for sure. Just to summarize again, this is not just another book. We've got a major physiological problem facing the planet, self-induced, societally induced, that we
Yes.
can head off. And Marc has pointed out most people aren't necessarily going to have to worry about it, but some people are. And we now have a model for how you can begin to think about how to undo the damage. So
Yeah,
Marc, yep.
I'm sorry, and everybody's got a friend or a family member who's been harmed. I mean, fortunately my sister's been harmed. There's many friends. I have like almost nearly 30 friends who have been harmed. So everybody knows somebody. Knowing how to help them, knowing what happened to them, um, helping them also potentially, and it's also very useful to talk to your doctors, because frankly speaking, the medical world is completely lost on this. I mean,
Yep.
they're completely lost. So
You've been told that this has been normalized. Nobody thinks about it. Nobody, reasons over it. They just do it. But when you present the logic and the physiology and the mechanism, it's very hard to dismiss this.
Yeah.
So great, Mark. Thank you so much, and
Thank you, Ken.
we will certainly be talking again.
Brass Check TV, free to you, not free to us. We've got a server bill, we've got an email software bill, we've got a tech helper bill, and that happens every month. So to everybody that is supporting us financially, that's paying for their subscription in one way or another, we really appreciate it. If you're not, consider doing so. Everybody's got money for the newspaper and the cable bill and all that. Do you have money for media that's actually serving you? That's really the issue here. And when you help us, it allows us to get this information out to the world. So thanks to all our supporters, and if you're not a supporter already, please consider becoming one.